I went to the bank that morning with no warning, no appointment. I just wanted to withdraw a little cash for groceries. But what I overheard inside shattered me. My own son-in-law, standing there in a crisp suit, was telling the bank manager that I was mentally unfit. That I shouldn't have control of my own money. My chest went cold, my hands shook, and right then I knew two things. 1, I had been betrayed in the cruelest way possible. And 2, I would not let him win. My name is Eleanor James, and I'm 81 years old. My life has been long and, for the most part, steady. I raised 2 daughters, buried my husband 10 years ago, and kept my modest home tidy and warm. I wasn't rich, but between Henry's pension, some careful savings, and the house we'd paid off long ago, I was comfortable. Comfortable enough to help my family when they needed it. My eldest daughter, Masha, was always the ambitious one. She married young, divorced fast, and spent years hopping from one job to another. My younger daughter, Claire, had been steadier, married to Thomas, her high school sweetheart, for more than 30 years. Thomas had always been polite to me, always respectful. A quiet man in public, sharp in his suits, with slick black hair that he never let grow gray. But that day at the bank, I saw a side of him I will never forget. I hadn't planned to go. I woke up early, craving fresh bread from the bakery down the street. I thought, why not stop at the bank first, withdraw some cash, then pick up groceries on the way back? I slipped on my gray cardigan, tied my hair into a bun, and tucked my worn leather purse under my arm. The bank was busy, the hum of computers and the faint click of shoes echoing in the marble hall. I waited in line for a teller, clutching my withdrawal slip. But before I reached the front, I spotted Thomas across the lobby, standing with the branch manager in one of those glass offices. I almost waved. But then I saw his face. Cold. Serious. Nothing like the polite son-in-law I knew. I slowed my steps, pretending to study a brochure while leaning closer to the glass. That's when I heard it. She's declining fast, he said smoothly, his voice low but firm. Eleanor isn't of sound mind anymore. We need to take over her finances before she makes mistakes. I'd like the paperwork started to declare her legally unfit. The words hit me like a knife. I pressed my trembling hand to the glass, breath catching. Mentally unfit? I balanced my own checkbook, cooked every meal, kept my home spotless. My mind was sharp, maybe slower than at 40, but sharp enough to know betrayal when I heard it. The manager frowned. Are you certain? That's a serious claim. Thomas leaned forward, lowering his voice even further. Yes. You'll see. She forgets things, repeats herself, gives away money without reason. If she controls her assets, it'll all vanish. Claire and I want to protect her, you understand. For her own good. My knees nearly buckled. Lies. Pure lies. My own son-in-law was painting me as weak, senile, incapable. Not out of concern, oh no, I could see the hunger in his eyes even from across the room. This wasn't about protecting me. This was about control. About money. I staggered back, clutching my purse to my chest. For a moment, I thought about bursting in, screaming the truth. But something stopped me. If he could lie so easily, what else had he planned? What would he twist if I confronted him too soon? So instead, I walked out. My heart pounded all the way home, each step heavier than the last. When I shut the door behind me, the tears came hot and fast. My own daughter's husband. Declaring me unfit like I was some broken doll to be tucked away. I sank into Henry's old chair, gripping the arms until my knuckles turned white. Parasite, senile, unfit. I had heard whispers before, little barbs from Brittany, the other daughter-in-law. But not Thomas. Not like this. Hours passed as I sat there in the quiet house. By evening, my mind had steadied. Tears dried into steel. If Thomas thought he could strip me of my dignity, he had forgotten who I was. I raised 2 daughters through storms, buried a husband, paid every bill without help. My mind was sharp enough to plan, sharp enough to fight. But I also knew this wasn't just about Thomas. No man marches into a bank with a scheme like that unless he feels untouchable. Unless someone else is helping him. I thought of Claire, my own flesh and blood. Sweet Claire, who used to braid my hair on Sunday mornings, who brought me flowers after Henry's funeral. Would she really stand by him in this? The thought crushed me, and yet deep down I knew the answer. I didn't sleep much that night. My mind kept replaying Thomas's voice, smooth and confident, as if my life were a simple matter of paperwork. I lay in the dark, listening to the clock tick, until an idea began to form. If he wanted to play this game, to declare me unfit, then I'd show him just how unfit I could be. I would make him believe he was winning. Let him build his case, let him show his hand. And when the time was right, I'd strike back so hard he'd never see it coming. But as I lay there, staring at the ceiling, one detail from the bank meeting gnawed at me. Something Thomas had said, something strange, almost too specific. He had mentioned money vanishing. That if I kept control, my assets would disappear. How could he know that? Because I hadn't told anyone about the missing check. The next morning, I stood in front of my bathroom mirror, staring at the reflection of a woman Thomas dared to call unfit. The face staring back at me was wrinkled, yes, with silver hair tied into a bun. My hands trembled from arthritis sometimes, true. But my eyes? They were clear. My mind? It was sharper than he could ever imagine. I whispered to myself, if they think I'm finished, they don't know me at all. The missing check gnawed at me. A few weeks before, I had written one to the local grocer, only for him to say later he never received it. I assumed it had been lost in the mail. I tore out another, and life went on. But now, remembering Thomas's words, the money will vanish, it didn't feel like coincidence anymore. Had he taken it? Or worse, had someone forged my name? I dug through my desk drawer until I found the checkbook. A few carbon copies were missing, numbers skipped. My stomach tightened. I kept records meticulously, and those gaps screamed louder the longer I stared. I decided then, I would not confront Thomas yet. I would collect proof. I would let him believe I was fragile while I sharpened my knife in the shadows. That afternoon, Claire called. Her voice was overly sweet, as if coated in honey. "Hi, Mom. How are you feeling?" I gripped the receiver tightly. "I'm fine. Why?" "Oh, no reason," she said too quickly. "It's just, Thomas mentioned you've been a little forgetful lately. We thought maybe it's time to help you with bills, take some stress off your shoulders." So it was true. She was in on it. My own daughter, the one I rocked to sleep through endless fevers, the one I walked down the aisle. She was sharpening the same knife to stab me with. "I appreciate the concern, dear," I said, keeping my voice soft. "But I'm managing just fine. Tell Thomas not to worry." There was a pause, just a beat too long, before she replied. "Of course, Mom. Just remember we're here if you slip up." Slip up. The words dripped like venom. I hung up and sat there in silence, my chest hollow. Betrayal doesn't always roar, sometimes it whispers through the voices you love most. That night, I called Patricia, my old friend from church. She was 83, still sharp as a tack, her curly white hair always pinned high. When I told her what I'd overheard at the bank, her gasp nearly rattled the receiver. "That snake. Declaring you unfit? And Claire agreeing? Oh, Eleanor, you can't let them do this." "I won't," I said quietly. "But I need proof. Something solid before I show my hand." Patricia lowered her voice. "Then start small. Check your accounts. Every withdrawal, every check. If they're meddling, it'll show up." The next morning, I walked into the bank again. This time, I requested a full statement for the last 6 months. The teller gave me a curious look, but handed me the thick envelope. At home, I spread the pages across my dining table. The numbers blurred together, but slowly, patterns emerged. Withdrawals I didn't remember making. Checks cashed that I didn't recall writing. Small amounts at first, then larger. 100 here. 300 there. Nearly $2,000 gone. My heart pounded. Someone was siphoning my money. I flipped page after page, until my eyes froze on a signature. My signature, or at least, it was supposed to be. It was jagged, uneven, just wrong enough that I could see the lie. Forged. My name, stolen. I pressed a trembling hand to my chest. This wasn't paranoia. This wasn't imagination. It was theft, plain and simple. And Thomas had the audacity to call me unfit? I knew then that the forged check from weeks ago wasn't the first. It was part of something bigger, a scheme Thomas had been running under my nose. But why had he been so bold with the bank manager? Why not just keep bleeding me quietly? The question made my skin crawl. What else was he planning? I decided to play my role carefully. The next Sunday at church, I wore my plain blue dress and let my hair sit a little messier than usual. When I saw Claire and Thomas across the pews, I made sure to fumble my hymn book slightly, my hands trembling just enough. I let them see me as weak, as the image Thomas was selling. His eyes flickered with smug satisfaction. Claire patted my hand after the service, her voice syrupy sweet. "Mom, you looked a little tired today. Why don't you come home with us? Stay a few days, let us take care of you." Take care of me? My stomach turned. That wasn't an offer, it was a trap. I shook my head gently. "Oh, thank you, but I'll be all right. I just need rest." Thomas's lips twitched into a smile that didn't reach his eyes. He thought his plan was working. But while they plotted, I was plotting harder. That evening, I tucked the bank statements back into their envelope and locked them in Henry's old trunk. I also began keeping a journal, logging every interaction, every comment, every time they suggested I was forgetful or tired. My evidence was growing, piece by piece. Still, one thing haunted me, the missing check. Why had Thomas mentioned money vanishing? Did he know I had caught on somehow? Or was it just arrogance, letting his tongue slip? Patricia warned me, "Be careful, Eleanor. Men like him get reckless when they think they're clever. Don't underestimate him." I didn't. In fact, I planned to use that arrogance against him. Over the next few weeks, I began leaving small mistakes for him to notice. I'd misplace my glasses intentionally, mutter to myself in the kitchen when I knew he was nearby, even forget to lock the door when they visited. And it worked. Thomas grew bolder. One afternoon, while Claire distracted me in the living room, I heard faint shuffling in my bedroom. My pulse raced. Later, when I checked, the top drawer of my dresser was slightly ajar, my checkbook moved. He was searching. I sat down in Henry's chair, staring out the window at the fading sunset. My plan was taking shape. I wouldn't just protect myself. I would make Thomas fall into his own trap. But as the days passed, one chilling thought gnawed deeper. If he had forged my signature and drained my account, what else was he willing to do? That night, I found a note slipped under my door in rushed handwriting. "Stop digging or you'll regret it." My hand trembled as I held the scrap of paper. For a moment, fear threatened to crush me. But then slowly, my lips curled into a thin smile. He had just made his biggest mistake. The note under my door shook me, but only for a moment. I read it again and again. "Stop digging or you'll regret it." The handwriting was jagged, rushed. No signature, of course. But I didn't need one. I knew exactly who had slipped it there. Thomas thought he could scare me into silence. But all he had done was confirm what I already suspected. He was guilty, desperate, and arrogant enough to leave breadcrumbs. I tucked the note into my journal, between my lists of bills I'd paid and checks I'd never written. Proof, stacked thicker every day. That night, as I sat in Henry's chair, I spoke softly to his photograph on the mantel. "He thinks I'm frail. He thinks I'm weak. But you know me, Henry. I don't break, I plan." And plan I did. The next morning, I visited the bank again, unannounced, just as I had that first day. The manager, a kindly man named Mr. Whitman, looked surprised to see me. "Mrs. James," he said, standing to shake my hand. "Back again so soon?" I smiled faintly, keeping my voice soft, almost fragile. "Yes, dear. I just wondered if you could help me with something. I misplaced some checks and, well, I'm worried they might have been used by mistake." He frowned, flipping through his computer. "Let me see. Yes, I notice a few irregularities. Larger withdrawals than usual, some signatures that don't quite match your file." He looked up at me, eyes sharp. "Would you like to file a formal report?" "Not yet." I needed Thomas to sink deeper before I pulled the ground from under him. "Oh, I'm sure it's just my memory," I said sweetly, patting his hand. "But could you please print me copies of those checks? Just for my records." He hesitated, then nodded. Minutes later, I walked out with a folder tucked into my purse. Inside were 3 checks, all forged with my name, all cashed. And one of them was the missing check. I stared at it in the sunlight outside the bank, my hands trembling. The date was exactly the week Thomas had told the manager that my money would vanish. My chest tightened. He hadn't just been plotting. He'd already acted. That night, Patricia came over, carrying a basket of blueberry muffins. When I showed her the checks, her eyes widened. Good Lord, Eleanor. This is criminal. You have enough to bury him in court. Not yet, I whispered. I want him to walk into the trap himself. I want him to think he's won. Then when he's standing tallest, I'll cut him down. Patricia chuckled darkly. Remind me never to cross you. I smiled, though my hands still shook. Revenge wasn't just about punishing Thomas. It was about reclaiming my dignity, my sanity, my name. The following Sunday, Claire invited me to dinner. She sounded nervous on the phone, her voice wavering. Mom, Thomas feels terrible about what he said at the bank. We just want to clear the air. Please come. Clear the air. My stomach knotted. Did she know I had overheard? Or was this just another performance? I wore my neat navy dress, polished my shoes, and tied my hair into a bun. When I arrived, the smell of roast beef filled the air. Claire greeted me with a stiff hug. Thomas stood at the table, wine glass in hand, his smile too polished, his eyes too sharp. Eleanor, he said warmly, so glad you came. Sit. I did, folding my hands in my lap. Dinner was awkward, polite conversation wrapped around an iron core of tension. Claire tried to talk about the children, about church. Thomas watched me too closely, as though waiting for me to slip, to fumble a fork, to forget a name. Halfway through, he leaned forward, his voice gentle but probing. Eleanor, have you thought about what we discussed at the bank? About letting us help you manage things? My heart pounded, but I forced a small laugh. Oh, Thomas. I'm not sure I'm ready to hand over my purse strings just yet. But maybe soon. I do forget things sometimes. His smile widened. Of course. No rush. Just think about it. But I saw it in his eyes, triumph. He thought I was folding, that the pressure was working. And that was exactly what I wanted him to think. Later that night, as I rode home in the taxi, I replayed every word, every glance. He was circling, waiting for me to stumble. But he didn't know that I had already mapped the battlefield. Over the next week, I let the performance continue. I left notes on the counter reminding myself to take out trash or pay bill, deliberately in Claire's view. I called Patricia once, loudly asking where I'd left my keys, knowing Thomas would overhear when he came by. And sure enough, whispers reached me. A neighbor mentioned that Thomas had been concerned about my health, that Claire had spoken of me declining. They were laying groundwork, weaving their net tighter. But while they whispered, I documented. Every note, every forged check, every overheard conversation went into my folder. I was building my fortress brick by brick. Still, the missing check nagged at me. Why that one? Why had Thomas risked cashing it so brazenly, then bragged about money vanishing? The puzzle's edges didn't quite fit. Patricia suggested, maybe he slipped. Maybe he didn't realize you'd notice. But I wasn't so sure. Something darker lurked beneath. One evening, I found another note under my door. This one was cleaner, deliberate. If you don't step aside, we'll make sure you do. The words chilled me. This wasn't just forgery anymore. This was a threat. I sat in Henry's chair for hours that night, staring into the dark, the note trembling in my hands. Fear pressed against my chest, but beneath it, fire burned. If they thought intimidation would make me bow, they had forgotten who raised this family. I whispered to the silence, let them come. I'm ready. And in that quiet moment, I decided, I would not just defend myself. I would make Thomas pay publicly, legally, and completely. He wouldn't just lose his scheme. He would lose his reputation, his freedom, and his wife's blind loyalty. But the question of that missing check still kept me awake, twisting in my chest like a thorn. Because deep down, I feared the truth wasn't just theft. It was something far worse. The days leading up to my trap were some of the hardest of my life. Not because I was afraid, though I was, but because I had to keep pretending. Pretending to be fragile, confused, ready to hand over my life to the very people who wanted to strip it away. I carried my notebook around the house, scribbling reminders in large letters and leaving them in plain sight, don't forget doctor's appointment. Turn off stove. Take medicine. Notes I didn't need but wanted Thomas and Claire to see. Every time they visited, I caught the quick glances, the satisfied smirks. They believed it. One afternoon, Claire stopped by alone. She sat across from me, her eyes glossy with what looked like sympathy, though now I knew better. "Mom," she began softly, "Thomas and I really think you'd be happier if you just let us handle things. No more bills, no more stress. We could even look into a nice assisted living place for you. Somewhere safe." Safe. The word landed like a brick. What she meant was contained. Put away, silenced, stripped of independence. I patted her hand gently. "You might be right, dear. I'll think about it." Her eyes lit up. She squeezed my hand, relief spilling across her face. "I'm so glad you're finally seeing it. You won't regret it." But she would. That evening, Patricia came over with a thermos of soup and her usual sharp tongue. When I told her what Claire had said, Patricia nearly dropped her spoon. "Assisted living? After all you've done for that girl? Eleanor, they're vultures. You can't just let them win." I smiled faintly. "Oh, I won't. But I need them to think they already have." Patricia's grin turned fierce. "What's the plan?" And so I told her. Step 1, let Thomas feel safe enough to make his final move. Step 2, catch him red-handed. Step 3, expose him so thoroughly that even Claire couldn't defend him. The key was the missing check. I still didn't know why that one had been used so boldly, but I suspected it tied to something bigger. I needed Thomas confident enough to reveal it himself. The opportunity came faster than I expected. The next week, Claire and Thomas invited me to their house for dinner. Their tone was light, but I could hear the eagerness underneath. I agreed, knowing full well this was another stage in their play. Their home was spotless, the table set with silver I knew Claire had never bought herself. As I sat down, Thomas poured me a glass of wine, his smile too wide. "To family," he said, raising his glass. I raised mine, forcing a weak smile. "To family." The meal was pleasant enough, though I barely tasted it. I was waiting, and so was he. Finally, halfway through dessert, Thomas leaned back in his chair, folding his hands. "Eleanor," he said smoothly, "Claire and I have been talking. We think it's time to make things official. The bank is ready to process the paperwork. If you sign over financial authority to us, everything will be easier. No more stress for you." Claire nodded eagerly. "You can just relax, Mom. We'll handle everything." I swallowed a bite of pie, then set my fork down with trembling hands. "You're probably right. I do get confused sometimes. I don't want to make a mistake." Thomas leaned forward, his eyes glittering. "That's why we're here. To protect you." I forced a smile. "All right then. Why don't you bring the papers by tomorrow? I'll sign." The satisfaction on his face was almost too much to bear. He thought he had me. But tomorrow would be his downfall. That night, I called Mr. Whitman, the bank manager, and Patricia. "Be at my house tomorrow morning," I told them. "It's time." When Thomas arrived the next day, papers in hand, his suit pressed sharp and his hair slicked back, I played my role perfectly. I invited him in, shuffling slowly toward the dining table. "Thank you for helping me, Thomas," I said, my voice weak. "It's all so confusing." He laid the papers out, tapping the lines with his pen. "Just sign here, and Claire and I can take care of everything. You won't have to worry again." I held the pen loosely, my hand shaking. I could feel his eyes on me, waiting for the moment he'd finally steal everything. But before the pen touched paper, there was a knock at the door. Thomas frowned. "Are you expecting someone?" I smiled faintly. "Yes." The door opened, and in walked Mr. Whitman, briefcase in hand, followed by Patricia, her chin high. Thomas's face drained of color. "What's this?" Mr. Whitman's voice was cool, professional. "Mrs. James asked me here to clarify a few things before she signs anything." I set the pen down gently and folded my hands. "Yes. I want to be sure I'm not making a mistake. After all, I wouldn't want my money to just vanish." The word landed like a stone. Thomas's eyes flickered, just for a second, and that was all I needed. Mr. Whitman laid out the forged checks on the table. Mrs. James has brought to my attention several irregular withdrawals. Care to explain? Thomas stammered, his face flushing. Those must be her mistakes. She's been forgetful. I'm forgetful? I cut in, my voice suddenly sharp. Then how do you explain this? I pulled out the note he had slipped under my door, sliding it across the table. Patricia crossed her arms, her eyes glittering with triumph. Thomas's mouth opened and closed, no words coming out. Mr. Whitman adjusted his glasses. Forged signatures. Unauthorized withdrawals. Attempted coercion to sign away finances. This isn't just misconduct, Mr. Reynolds. This is fraud. Thomas's face twisted, panic breaking through the mask. You can't prove. But I leaned forward, my voice low and steady. We can. And we will. For a long moment, the only sound was Patricia's soft chuckle. Finally, Thomas shoved back his chair, grabbing the papers. This is ridiculous. You'll regret this, Eleanor. He stormed out, slamming the door so hard the windows rattled. I sat back, my hands trembling, but not from fear. From victory. Patricia squeezed my shoulder. You've got him cornered now, Eleanor. He'll make a mistake, and when he does, you'll have everything you need. I nodded, though my chest was still tight. I had exposed him, yes. But the missing check still haunted me. There was something about it, the date, the amount, that didn't add up. And deep down I knew, the final piece of the puzzle would be the sharpest blade of all. The morning after Thomas stormed out of my house, I woke earlier than usual. The sun was barely up, pale light bleeding into the curtains. I sat in Henry's chair with a cup of coffee, the steam warming my face, my mind replaying every moment from the day before. I'd cornered him. I'd laid the forged checks in front of him, the note, the bank manager, the witness. His face had cracked like glass under a hammer. But despite my small victory, the battle wasn't over. The missing check still gnawed at me. Why that one? Why had Thomas cashed it so boldly, then boasted at the bank that my money would vanish? I needed answers. That afternoon, I went back to the bank, folder of evidence under my arm. Mr. Whitman greeted me with a firm handshake, his eyes kind. Mrs. James, I've reviewed those checks again. There's something unusual about one of them. He spread the copies across his desk, pointing to the one I already knew by heart, the missing check. This one wasn't just forged. It was used to transfer money directly into another account. I leaned closer, my heart pounding. Whose account? Mr. Whitman hesitated, then lowered his voice. Thomas Reynolds. The world tilted for a moment. My son-in-law hadn't just stolen my money. He'd funneled it straight into his own account, bold as brass, as if daring me to catch him. But there was more. Mr. Whitman slid another page across the desk. This check was tied to a loan application. A business loan. He used your funds as proof of assets. My breath caught. He used my money to get a loan? Mr. Whitman nodded grimly. Yes. He claimed he was your financial guardian. The bank approved it under that assumption. Without verification, it looks legitimate. But with your testimony, the forged checks, and his attempt to get you declared unfit, the picture is clear. The room swam around me, anger rising hot in my chest. Thomas hadn't just wanted my savings, he wanted my identity, my dignity, my life's work. He was building his empire on my back. When I left the bank, folder thicker than ever, I felt something harden inside me. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about justice. That evening, Patricia came by. I laid everything on the table, the forged checks, the note, the loan papers. Her eyes widened. He stole your money to fund his business, she spat. That's not just greedy. That's criminal. Exactly, I said quietly. And now it's time to let the law do its work. The next morning, with Mr. Whitman's help, I filed a formal complaint. Fraud. Forgery. Identity theft. It was all there, black and white. The police took copies of everything, their faces grim as they listened. Within days, Thomas was summoned. Claire called me in tears, her voice shaking. Mom, how could you? He was just trying to help us. I closed my eyes, the ache in my chest sharp. No, Claire. He was trying to bury me alive. And you helped him dig. She sobbed, begged me to drop it, but I stayed firm. You chose him over me. Now you live with the choice. News spread quickly in our small town. People whispered in the grocery store, in church pews, at the post office. Thomas Reynolds, respected businessman, under investigation for defrauding his own mother-in-law. The day of his arrest, I stood on my porch, watching the patrol car pull up in front of their house across town. Officers led him out in handcuffs, his suit wrinkled, his face pale with fury. Claire stood in the doorway, her hands over her mouth, tears streaming down her face. The children huddled behind her, wide-eyed and silent. For a moment, I almost pitied her. Almost. But then I remembered her voice on the phone, soft and poisonous. We just want to take the stress away, Mom. No. She had chosen her side. Weeks later, the trial came. I sat in the front row, folder of evidence on my lap, my cardigan buttoned neat, hair pinned into a bun. When the prosecutor laid out the forged checks, the false loan application, the threats, Thomas's face burned red. He avoided my gaze, but I never looked away. The jury didn't take long. Guilty. He was sentenced to prison, his reputation shattered, his business gone. Claire sat pale and trembling, unable to meet my eyes as they led her husband away. When it was over, I walked out of that courthouse taller than I'd felt in years. Patricia squeezed my arm, whispering, "You did it, Eleanor. You won." But I shook my head. No. I defended myself. There's a difference. That evening, back at home, I sat in Henry's chair, staring at the garden through the window. The roses were blooming, their petals opening wide under the sun. For the first time in a long time, I felt peace. Thomas had tried to declare me unfit, to strip me of my dignity, to steal the life Henry and I built together. He called me weak, fragile, senile. But in the end, it was his arrogance that destroyed him. The missing check, the very proof he thought would cement his scheme, became the weapon that cut him down. And as I sat there, sipping my tea, I whispered to Henry's photograph on the mantel. They thought I was finished. But I showed them. I showed them all. I leaned back, letting the quiet fill the house once more. Because in the end, I wasn't the one who was unfit. It was Thomas. And now, the world knew it.